In this video, I'll be stripping this family heirloom piano stool, renovating damaged wood with traditional handmade filler to take new tacks, replace the webbing whilst keeping the base as a past family memory. I'll pad the seat but keep original foam and fabric and finish the edges with decorative antique brass nails. Hello, welcome to my channel Croft House. Today I'm going to be recovering this little piano stool. I'm going to try and replace the cloth. It's already been done. The fabric matches the three-piece suite, the customer's three-piece suite. So we're going to try and put this back. It was a bit tricky to do the corners. It's got layers of old fabric and it's really difficult to tack into because the wood has had several covers on it and there's not much there to get a purchase. So I'm going to be making my own putty to fill this wood filler with sawdust, glue and water. Now these are original nails and I'm decorative nails, we call them decorative brass nails, and I'm going to replace those with a strip because what I will do is staple this back on and then put these over it, because the staples, if we can look a little bit closer at this piece of wood, can you see how damaged it's become? And staples are much kinder. Let's take a quick look at the tools that I'm going to use. First of all, I'm using this tack ripper, so we just can get under the tacks and pull those out. Very careful of the fabric and this piece of wood here, we don't want to damage this, so we go into it away from the wood. I have some small pliers just in case something gets stuck and I need to oik it out. Don't really need the hammer at the minute, and a mallet just to hit the end of the ripping tool. So just take a look at the technique I use to do this. Now these are not in terribly well. Look, I can almost pull that one out. I can with my fingers, and they've been used, so they're very bent. So I don't actually even need to use the mallet. I can just get under there and very gently pull them out. Okay. If you need a little bit of extra help, you can just use the mallet. A little tap. The reason I don't want to go up on this is because it's right on this piece of show wood, and if I do that I'm going to get a dent in it. See, if you look, you can see the wood's been chipped a bit already. So you either go down very carefully, so we're not getting onto that piece of wood, or you can go sideways, but you do have to be careful that your metal isn't going to be chipping into this piece of wood. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way around, take all those off, and then we'll look at the next step. Let's just take a look at some of the damage on it. You might find you've got some old tacks left in here. Now if you can easily get those out, you really need to be careful. This wood is so damaged. You know, you can perhaps pull with your tack ripper, or if you can get hold of it, with some pliers and carefully bring it out, then that's great. Sometimes it's better just to leave them in there, but the only problem with that is that you might find that exactly where you want to put your next nail in is where you hit an old head. So the wood here, as we can see, had several covers tacked into it, and as I always say, tacks are traditional. They give you lovely upholstery, but they're so damaging to the wood, and I tend, if the customer is happy, to use staples because they're so much gentler. Now we have a piece here that's completely come off, so I'm going to glue these loose bits back on first before I start to fill. If we look at the top of the stool, the webbing is very loose now. Oh, coming off. As loosened. And that's just going to get looser over time. Somebody's put a piece of wadding underneath to try and lift it. This was the customer's grandmother's, so I'm going to keep this base because it's pretty sturdy, and I can just tighten that up quite easily. Once these screws with the webbing have been removed, I can soon pull that out. So I'm going to keep that, recycle the base, and change the webbing. So I'm not sure if you can see here, but there was a piece of wood that had come off. I've glued that back. I use Gorilla wood glue, good and sturdy. So I've put that back, and I just use a couple of weights to hold that in place. If you can tie it, you know, if it's on a joint that you can tie, I use crepe bandages if I don't have, or you may have a vise that you can use. But on this bit of wood, really the only way to do it was to put a weight on it. Now let's look at how we can fill this. Probably the quickest way is to use a commercial wood filler. And I like the Roxil. You take a sort of golf-sized ball of this and you mix it with a pea-sized piece of this. And it comes with a little spatula. So I'm going to put that all back together. The other way is to make your own filler. This is a sort of traditional way, and I'll show you how to do it, and then you can take your choice. Now I've got 2 tablespoons of sawdust, very fine sawdust, and we use 4 tablespoons of water. And mix that together, mix it really well, and then we just leave that alone for a few minutes just so it really can mix in well. Okay. The next thing we do is take a piece of cotton cloth. I've used this before, that's why it's a funny colour. This is just a piece of old curtain lining fabric, and I've wet it. I find it a bit easier to use if it's wet first. And then once you're happy, your sawdust is well mixed and soaked, we just pour that into the cloth. Make sure you get as much water as you can out of that bowl because it's going to go back. Okay. And then you squeeze out as much water as you can. Really give it a good tight wringing. You get as much water as possible. When you're happy, you've got as much out as you possibly can. So it still keeps dripping. Okay. And then you're going to put it back. Ooh, drippy bits around here. Okay, so that's a nice, looks like putty already, except it's pretty crumbly. Whoa, yo. As much of that as you can, back in the bowl. Okay. And then we're going to put the glue in it. So make sure you have an old spoon for this. And I've got the Gorilla glue. And for the ratio of 2 tablespoons of sawdust, 4 of water, I'm going to use a generous teaspoon of the wood glue, so it's sort of 1 to 1.5 almost. And mix that in with it. And you're actually going to use your hand once you've got that in. You don't want to be over sticky. Get as much as you can in with a spoon. Sorry. Okay, so we'll mix that in as much as we can with the spoon, and then just use your hands because it's the best way. So this is quite mucky and messy, and if you like trying new things, it's quite interesting to do it. So we need to get that really mixed in well. Okay, so we're just mixing that all really well together so it becomes a much stickier, gluier putty before we get it in the chair. And once you're happy, again, you've got that all mixed in well, and then you can use it to put in the chair. Fill those cracks. So now it's time to fill it. So give everything a good brush, make sure you've got all the dust and dirt off everywhere, and you're happy that it's ready to fill. And then you just take a piece of your putty, and I find my fingers are better than any tool. It might be a bit mucky with the rock sill, and then just draw it along that edge so that it's going in. Push it, give it a rub, so you're getting that right in all the holes and the cracks. Okay, and do that right the way along. If it starts to go hard, which I don't think it would take a while before it goes hard, but if it did, then you just have to discard it and start again. But this stays, it's got some water in it, and the glue is moist, so it does stay open quite a long while. So really get that in, and when you're happy that you've got that in to everything that you might need to nail or staple into, you need to level off this beveled edge, because on this one anyway the fabric's going to come down to it. So I'm just using a screwdriver because that's what I've got at hand. Just to draw along that edge to get the worst off, and then I'm just going to do it with my nail, because that I can feel then that and see that I'm getting a really sharp finish. Or you could use a knife perhaps or something. I think when you've done it all, you can come back and just brush off any loose bits. And if you find that there's not enough, then you'd have to come back and do it again. But it dries really firmly, so I think you'd be pretty much okay with the first lot. There should be then enough to get a good purchase with any tacks. Now let's just take a look at one I made earlier, just to show you. I just had the one ball, I put it back into the rag to make a hard ball. And then after day 1, I could crumble bits off it. After day 2, I could snap it. And now I'm on day 3, and it's really, really hard. I can't get my nail in that. I can't break it. If you've got a thick bit, it's possible the centre is softer. So I would say minimum of 3 days wait. Whereas the rock sill will dry really quickly, but even with the rock sill, I still would wait a couple of days before I attempted to nail or staple into it, because it's got to be hard like wood. In fact, it'd probably be harder than wood. This certainly feels pretty hard. And now that it's in the stool, I'm just going to leave it for probably 4 days. And it's quite interesting, isn't it, that it turns black And it's certainly gone darker in the putty than the sawdust was, and adding the glue, I guess there's some chemical in the glue and that's turned it looks like a piece of coal. Right, so 4 days and a haircut later, the filler, the putty that we made is quite firm. I can push my nail into that and it feels okay, and if I poke a nail into it, that also feels quite firm, so I'm happy that I can go ahead with that. Now you can give it a little sand if it feels rough, if you want to. It's not going to be seen as long as there's no real sharp bits poking out. But make sure you give everywhere a bit of a brush just to get all those loose bits off. Again, you're only nailing into it, but I think it's better. Okay, and then the next thing I'm going to do is take off this webbing. But first of all, let's look at the tools and materials I'm going to use. The tools I will use firstly to remove the webbing are the tack lifter and the mallet, which you know, and the little pliers in case something gets stuck and I need to give it an extra helping hand. The webbing is 2" or 5cm jute, plain webbing, and I use this web stretcher to help tighten the webbing over the edge of whatever I'm upholstering, but I'll show you that as we go along. The tacks that we will use, they come in 3 sizes. It's the 13mm. The 16mm would be used for the lashing cord for tying the springs into place, and the 10mm just for basic tacks to put the fabric back on the chair. But as I said, the 13mm are the right weight and strength to hold the webbing in place. So very simple process as you've done before. Depends how many tacks you've got. I've only got 3. Nothing's going to happen to this piece of wood, so it's just a matter of giving them a good bash, because they're longer tacks than when you take the fabric off, so they need a little bit more of a bash, and that's it, and you just go around till you've got all your webbing off. The webbing is off. It actually just pulled off the tacks pull through the webbing, but you need to get them out because you don't want to be hitting the old nails when you put the webbing back. So if you've got some that are loose, whip them out. The next thing I'm going to do is try and tighten up this base cloth. The only purpose of this is sort of keeps the dust and the dirt in, and you can't see it that way around, perhaps you can. It looks a lot tidier, obviously, from the back. So I don't want to have to take any more tacks out than I need to, take any more time on it, so I'm just going to stretch it. One tool I use is a magnetic hammer. It's really, really helpful and sort of, again, saves a bit of time. Let's just take another tack, and opposite where, let's see which one's new now, this one. Well, I've just put that tack in, I'm going to just pull it tight. There's plenty of wood under here. Okay, and then I'm just going to stretch it end to end. Yes, that tacks quite nicely. Whoops. Mind your fingers. Very hard wood, actually. This end, and that's got that in there. It's got that nice and straight. Okay, so once you've done that, you just carry on around and then we'll put the webbing on. I've got this base on nice and tightly. It's absolutely fine. It's not, doesn't serve any purpose other than to, as I said before, catch the dust and just cover the hole, make everything look nice and neat and tidy. Now I started to use the webbing. It's not quite so important on a little stool like this that won't probably get as much use, but if you were upholstering an armchair, you would really need to get this webbing on firmly. So the proper technique is to put three 13mm tacks in a triangle. So you start with 2 at the top and 1 at the bottom. You then fold that over and you do the opposite triangle, okay? So now I'm using 13mm, but this is mahogany and it's so hard. I think I'm going to revert to 10s on the top, because it is strength, but it's also just kind of holding it in place. Incredibly hard wood. Now you can put 2 here and you put another one in the top, which I will do on this one, but I'm not going to do it on the others because I don't think it really needs quite so many. Okay, so that's the style. So I've put 13s underneath and 10s on the top. This has got a good wide piece of wood, so I've got plenty of room to manoeuvre this. Never put it right close to the edge because you end up getting layers. Once you've got that down, give the crease a tap. Everything as flat as possible. Okay? Now, make sure you find the centre. Obviously you can see that, but find the centre and then we will go in between for the next 2. So now we're going to use the web stretcher. It's got this little cutout piece because that sits under the piece of wood. Now on an armchair you're going to cover the wood and everything, so it doesn't matter, but if the wood is exposed then you've got to be a little bit careful not to damage that wood. So we go down from the top, okay, push it through. Oh. And lock it in and pull it tight, okay, and then hold it because sometimes it slips a bit, and you wedge under, and what you want to do is have it so that your stretcher is a little bit of an angle, and then you hang on. Oop. I'm a bit short for this angle, but it's better for you to see it. And then you stretch, okay? So you pull it, don't over pull it, you don't want to rip anything, but it needs to be firm enough, sort of drum tight, I guess, that it's going to hold. So hang on to that for dear life. Get your tacks, and this is where the magnetic hammer comes in really handy. Make sure you're not going off the edge of your wood. And we go that almost frightens me having to hit this hard, but it really is tough wood. Okay, so 1. Oh, I don't yet. That's okay. 2 and 3. Okay, and that's held that in place really well. And then we just cut it off, fold over. And you can actually give it a bash at this point. Get everything in place, and then I'm going to just use the 10s. 1. Oh. I'm being precise because I'm showing you, but if you don't go exactly where you want, it really doesn't matter. You're not going to see it as long as it's held in place. Okay. Okay, and that's all I'm going to do on this one. As I say, if you're doing an armchair, something that's going to get a lot of weight on it, do the 6, but this one has actually only got 5, and that's perfectly adequate for this stool, more than adequate probably. So we then go kind of between the wood, the ridge of the wood, and this piece of webbing for the next one. Okay, put it all in the same place and we carry on exactly the same. Okay, so I'm going to put these 3 on and then I'll show you how we weave in for the lengthways pieces. I apologise for the light shining on me, but it's a cold November day in UK and the sun is shining, so it's rather wonderful. Now we're going to put the long webs across. We're just going to put 2 because there isn't room for more. Depending on what you're upholstering, you may need 4 and 3 on a big armchair, but you just gauge it and you can see if you're reupholstering what comes off. So we weave to give it a really good solid base. So I'm going under, over, under on this one. And then when I put the next bit on, I will go over, under, over. And that gives everything a really firm base when it's all pulled really tight. And I just continue with those in exactly the same way, and then you can have a look. Okay, so the webbing is now all fixed in place. And if we go a little closer, you can see the weave. Okay, and then the next job is to put the foam. I'm going to put a little layer of decor on and then fix the top cloth. Debating what to use to give the stool a bit more body. I don't want to get rid of the foam because the whole point is keeping Granny's stool. And the foam is actually fine. It's a little bit thin, but it's not perished in any way. So I've decided to use this cotton linta felt, white cotton wadding that I buy on a big roll, and it's quite thick, but again it squashes down quite well, and I think this will work. So we'll try this and see. I have to be a little bit careful because I have to put back the original fabric the customer has asked because it matches her settee, so I can't pad out the seat too much more. So let's have a go and see if that works. The felt comes on a kind of J-cloth backing, which is actually quite useful if you're a gardener. Keep it as a fleece for your plants. And we can literally just rip it across. Okay. And the good thing about this felt, as you will see as we go along, is that you can feather it out, so you can make the ends thinner if you need to. So I have a layer of linta felt and the old foam. If I was putting on a new piece of fabric, I would have been tempted to put another little bit of wadding underneath. Sit on your piece of furniture, if it's a stool or a chair, and see what it feels like. So when I just had this foam, I just felt it needed something, which is why I went for the slightly firmer cotton felt, and this would have made it really, really comfortable. However, the fabric has been nailed on, and because it's velvet we can see all the markings, so I have to be really, really careful that I can stretch that over and those markings are going to disappear. Yeah, so unfortunately we just go with the 2. With the linta felt, you can, as I said, you can feather it, and so you can just pull bits off to how you want it. Now I don't want it to come over the sides of the foam, I just want a bit more comfort on the top. So literally you can pull it off like that and tidy it up, and then it all smooths in beautifully together. Okay, so you've got no more sort of padding on the sides, just on the seat where you need it. Okay, and then you can carry on all around until you're happy with that. And then we put the top cloth on. If you were using polyester wadding, decorative, some people put spray glue on. I don't, because I think if you do that you can't separate them later, and you know, eventually it might need, or it might just be out of choice, somebody wants to put a different piece of fabric on, and you can change the wadding, put a thicker bit of wadding on. You can't if it's glued. Not really, not without sort of ripping bits off the foam. I guess, you know, if you rip bits off the foam, you put a piece of wadding on the top, but it's just something to think about. I just want to give you a quick look at this fabric in case at any time you're working with velvet that's been recycled. I'm sure if you ever did a project like this, you would be putting on a new piece of fabric. But a tip with velvet, and this is, I'm having to put this back and it's been nailed into with decorative nails. So give it a good old brush. Brush the pile. You can do this with velvet. So if you've been quite firm with it, brushing it in all directions with that pile, it's a bit fiddly. And as I say, hopefully you wouldn't have to do it. But if you can see the difference between the one that has not been brushed, here, and the one that has, it makes quite a difference. This has been folded on before, and I'm going to have to put it back like that. I'll perhaps trim it a little bit, because you're going to use this decorative nail strip. And when I put that on, you can see the bottom edge. Now, ideally you would fix a piece of braid, and then you can cut the fabric at the edge. So you just have one layer, and then you trim it, and then you can glue on this braid. I mean, this is a scroll braid, and here we have just a flat piece. Okay, so that absolutely covers that edge. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do that, so I'm going to have to fold it. What I should have said is this is a good time when everything's off to give it a good polish. Now, there are different ways to do it, and I'm not going to get into it in this video. You may want to paint it blue, but this is a good time. I tend to use a tinted beeswax because I don't want to hide the history of the wood. So, you know, unless you want to lacquer it and make it look like a new stool, keep the history in there, especially if it's an ancestral piece. Right, so the next thing is to get this top cover on. Make sure the pile runs forward. So this is the front of the stool, and it's the bit that they use next to the piano, so I'm making sure my pile comes this way. And you, on your new piece, if you're using braid, would just staple it on here, and then you can trim this bit off afterwards. But as I said, I can't do that because I'm using this decorative strip, and we're going to see the bottom of it. Okay, so what you would normally do, and as I said, I'm just using the staple gun initially to get them in to place, because it's kinder on the wood, and this wood was so damaged. It should be okay now that I've filled it. I've just marked with this pin where the centre of my strip is going to go, so that I can get my staples in line in the right place. I'm going to do one either side, one each end, and then take a look to make sure that it's sitting in place and I can cover the old nail holes. Entirely up to you how you do it, but generally I recommend we put 3 staples, 3 and 3, and then you're stretching it backwards. So let's just have a go at this. And then we just staple in, and hopefully we can cover that. Okay, so that just sits nicely on that edge. And now I'm going to go bring her out. Smooth it over, and then it will pull quite firmly, and hopefully I can cover those nails, because it was fixed quite loosely. But as I say, if you've got a new piece, you're not going to have quite the worry of this. And actually I'm going to put this one in a little bit looser so that I can pull it out, because I may need to tighten it. So let's just do the ends, one on each end. Again, we've got to have to fold this over and hopefully it'll all come into place. And once we've got that one on, then we can do the other edge, the second edge. Okay. Right, and then you take a look at how firm that is, and if you're happy with it, you can continue. But it is quite good to temporary tack first if you're not used to it, because you might get it all on and then think, oh, it needs to be a bit tighter, and then you've got to get them all out and it's quite tricky, whereas if they're temporary tack you can whip them out really quick with one of your little tools. Okay, so I've now got 3 either side, either end. It's nice and firm, not overstretched, but it's giving me a good firm base to sit on. So I'm now going to continue either side and end to about 2 inches of the corner with the staples, and then we'll take a look at how to do the corners. And now we're coming to the corners, and what I'm going to do is fold this edge around and the top, the end down over that, and of course it's going to be hidden behind this leg then. When you get to your corners, especially if you've got a recycled piece of foam, you're going to find they're fairly flat. So this is a good time to take some of your cotton wadding, the bits that you pulled off, and just pack out those corners, and you can pack them as much or as little as you like, and if you find it's too much with the cotton wadding you can just pull it out. Okay, so you just do that until you feel that you've got a nice edge on there, and then you've got a bit more body there to work with. Yeah, make sure you've not got any lumps and bumps, but you can usually smooth those out. Now, apart from trying to move out of the sun, I've made myself a little bit of a table so that I can balance the top of the stool. So let's take a closer look now at how we want to do the corner. I've taken the staples on the back edge right to the end. Now it's very important, what I'm going to do is, as I pull this round, is to make sure this corner, there's no sharp bits here. So this tool you may have seen on my other videos is the regulator. It has a sharp or flat end and a sharp point the other, and we can use it for different things, but in this case to move the padding around, and you can sometimes get in and really hoik it round, but here I'm just using it to really poke it onto that corner so that I haven't got a sharp edge sticking out. Okay, so your pad, sorry, did I say hair? Your wadding needs to go under the foam because the foam gives a smoother surface. Okay, ooh, there's a good. So we just poke that right in over that sharp corner. Okay, and make sure you've got enough coming along here, and that's going to come round, and at this point you can cut off some of your bulk, whether you're pulling it down or doing it this way. If you were pulling it down, it's actually easier to see how much you don't need, and you can cut that off. I'm having to fold it, so I decide where I want this to come to here, make a mark there, decide where this bit will fold, make a mark there, and I can cut the top off, which I've actually done, okay, across that point. So we pull everything around here, and once we've got that over and where we want it here. Then make sure the wadding has come up to your corner, which mine is being very temperamental. Okay, got it. And then just put a little staple in close, slightly different angle on this one, close to very close to the edge. I use this staple gun with a little compressor, but you may not want a compressor in your kitchen, so you can use an electric staple gun or just a hand staple gun, but the more power, the further they're going to go in, and if they're not in, you can use a hammer and give them a bash. Now with your piece, if you're fixing it with braid and going to cut it, very simple. You just pull that across so you've got a nice neat corner, okay, down here. You don't want it coming too far in here, so as far as closer to the corner you can get it, the better, and the more wadding you've got under there will help. And then you just continue stapling. Unfortunately for me, I have to do a bit of jiggery pokery. I just need to make sure I'm getting a nice line along here, that I've pulled it over in the right place so it's all coming nice and tightly. So just fold it under, and then I can tuck that bit back and fiddle around with it until I've got that nice sharp edge on there, and then continue with the stapling. So once you've got your corners set in place, you've eliminated as much bulk as you can from in here. As I say, easier if you haven't got to fold it. You just then lay it down and continue stapling in place. Ooh. Okay. So the corners are all nicely in place now, everything's smooth, feels good. The last thing to do is put on the decorative trim. So this trim has 4 kind of fake heads, and then you put a nail in the 5th in the hole, okay, to fix it. So because this is the back and this is the bit that's going to be seen, so I want to make sure that I've got a nice edge on there. I also want my join to come behind the leg. So I've kind of worked it out that if I put a couple here and come around to the other end, I've got one on the end, right on the end here. Now what I do for that is give it a couple of little gentle taps, just so that it's not held. Just to hold it, and then I'm happy that that is going to cover all the staples. Yeah. Then I use a piece of fabric so that I'm not damaging this nail head, okay? Give it a couple of taps and have a look, because it can go right off kilter if you're not careful. Yeah. And you can come back afterwards and have a look at all those, right? So I've got those there, and this will come around this edge and not be seen, hopefully. Okay, so all the staples are underneath, and I can just continue with these right along, and I've got it so it's sitting right down to that edge, and luckily the staples have gone in the right place. Just get a little poke and then use your cloth. Okay, good. These I bought these in strips. Before I've bought it on great long rolls, but I don't have the space and I don't do so much upholstery now, so this is another good way if you've just got a small job to do. I've now put the decorative strip all the way around, and the only bit left to do is the final join. With these strips, they come with the hole in the end. and you can lap them over and just put a nail through the two, and you hide that completely. Okay, so that's what I put a join in the middle, and now on the end you can cut it with these wire cutters quite easily. So this was the beginning, and I've just cut this end off, and all I'm going to do now is put this one on top to kind of hold that end down. So just putting in the final nail, give that a little tap to hold it, and then cover it because I will mark. So all in very nice and neatly. So that's it finished, and the final thing, you can just give it a buff up with a soft cloth, get any fingerprints off it, and take it back and start playing the piano. If you'd like to see more videos on upholstery, reupholstery and soft furnishing, please subscribe to my channel, hit the like, hit the bell to be notified when I make new ones. And thank you very much for watching. See you next time.